I thoroughly enjoyed Miss Martian in Young Justice. This show was actually my first introduction to the character of Miss Martian, and so any and all ways that I look at this character will always be skewed towards the lens of this show, as it was my first introduction and is my favorite interpretation of the character, even comic books included. So when I did a little research for this video, specifically looking into Miss Martian in the comics, I was fairly disappointed to find that this show quite literally rewrote her entire character and made her substantially different than what she was, especially pre-52, previously to when this show came out in like 2010. And honestly, I think a lot of these changes were for the better, as they ended up giving Miss Martian a real character arc and real depth to her character, and I didn't really find her very enjoyable in the comics, but again, I'll just be honest, my view of the character will always be skewed towards this version. And so with all that being said, that's enough for a quick intro. I'm excited to talk about Miss Martian in Young Justice. And speaking of quick intros, the very first time that we see her in the show is at the end of the two-parter. At the end of the two-parter, Miss Martian is introduced as the final official member of the team, at least for the core group that we see throughout the first episode. M'gann is first and foremost introduced to us as Martian Manhunter's niece, and for the only time that I will probably mention in this video, Wally West's first love interest, because the dude is all over her for like half the season, if not more, and is constantly making jokes towards that. And this is the only time I mention this because I don't want to keep bringing it up every time Wally does it because it's just so frequent, even if it is one of my favorite running gags. Regardless, Miss Martian isn't exactly very in tune with human customs. She's coming from Mars, a place in which reading minds is just as normal as speaking the way humans do every single day, as well as using all of her Martian abilities. Her entire life, it has not been abnormal for her to use her abilities in the slightest. So when she has to come to Earth and adapt to Earth's new customs, especially since she's maybe only been on the planet a few months by this point, it's definitely going to be a rough start, surrounded by a bunch of already traumatized teens, much like she is, but to a lesser extent, and we'll talk about that more later. I mean, her whole idea of human culture is quite literally an American sitcom, so her whole idea behind how to talk to people and how to resolve conflicts and deal with everything is based off of a sitcom where everything gets solved in like 22 minutes, so it's actually kind of funny. And she is super big into cooking, especially early in this first season, and she's absolutely terrible at it. So she was in for a quite rude awakening when she tries to use her telepathy on Superboy, and it goes horribly wrong.
What's wrong? I don't understand. Everyone on Mars communicates telepathically.
M'gann, stop!
So yeah, M'gann's not exactly off to a great start, but at least she's trying and very much apologizes for doing these things, even if Superboy is less than receptive to her apologies, which hurts her in a way. But for right now, she's kind of perfectly fine, and we get introduced to Bioship, who I will just affectionately call Ship for the rest of this video because that's what everybody else calls her. It is a Martian piece of technology that's essentially mentally linked to M'gann, and she's able to fully control it using her mind. It's super cool. It's really awesome, and it doesn't really need much mention past this. And this eventually leads into M'gann's first true combat scenario, and boy is she fresh. She's definitely has the most raw talent and power on the team. I think that was made very apparent throughout the first few episodes, but she is the most raw. Even Superboy has a lot of Superman's memories implanted, so he's not nearly as raw as her, but the other three have quite literally been doing this for at least 2, 3, 4 years on a lot of their lives. So, of course, M'gann is the first to make a rookie mistake, assuming this is nothing more than a drill from Red Tornado.
Hello, Megan! Mr. Twister is Red Tornado in disguise! He's inorganic, an android! And how many androids do you know that can generate tornadoes?
Suffice to say, M'gann was pretty wrong, like really wrong, and ends up lowering the guard for her entire team and unfortunately getting them all completely destroyed. Now, it is her quick thinking that is able to save the team, but at the end of the day, making a rookie mistake like this when it means life or death isn't exactly going to go over well with the rest of the squad, and since there is no defined leader, she pretty much gets the boot by majority vote, and Superboy is not very kind about it. Again, I find it a little hypocritical that Superboy was so quick to tell her to get kicked out, but, you know, considering he's so new himself, but I guess it's kind of whatever, and it works for the episode. It is ultimately, though, McGann who comes up with the genius idea to pretend to be Red Tornado in an event to lower the guard of whom they're fighting, that being Mr. Twister. While McGann did ultimately display that she is fresh in the game, it's also good to note that her ideas and her creativity, specifically with her power use, will oftentimes lead to a lot of the team's victories throughout this show, while also highlighting how McGann's own insecurities are really what's holding her back a lot of the time. That and the occasional poor communication, like when she found out that this dude was a robot and crushed him to death in front of the team without, saying anything first. And even better for McGann, not only does she smooth over just about everything with every member of the team, she also gets Superboy's most heartfelt apology that he could possibly muster, which is just a simple "I'm sorry," but that seems to really do it for McGann. And that leads us into McGann's first big, mini arc in this first season, which is her love and subsequent crush on Superboy. She is very, very clearly had a crush on him since the first episode. And I know I wasn't going to mention Wally and her again, but I don't know if she was purposefully ignoring his advances or just blatantly oblivious, but it was kind of funny watching her just ignore Wally's love for her constantly. I thought it was hilarious. But this whole entire episode does nothing more than to further McGann's for Superboy and her want to be around him, and the little fun dialogue interactions they have, like this one.
Don't you want to lead?
You?
After the Mr. Twister fiasco?
You did all right.
It's definitely kind of sweet. And one thing I'll say about Young Justice is I feel like it's one of those few shows where I don't feel like I can skip an episode. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of filler in this first season specifically, and I don't feel like there's any episodes I need to skip or that are worth skipping on a rewatch. But not every episode will further every single character's arc, so I'm not going to cover every episode in this video, just the ones that I think are truly relevant to McGann. And of course, with her crush will naturally come jealousy. The following few episodes are introducing us to Artemis, one of the core members of the team going forward, and in the episode she gets introduced, her and Wally are really just arguing with each other all episode, and she ends up hitting on Connor, much to Miss Martian's dismay.
That boy. He can hear you. We can all hear you.
One thing I really seem to clock about McGann's character is for the first half of the season, she's really more tied to Connor than anything else and does a lot more for his character development than her own personal character. And so for the first half of the season, a majority of these episodes, she's just kind of there. Very much enjoyable, but not doing a whole lot to further her own character. And we also see some of that in Downtime, in which she is directly paired with Connor because they're the only two people that actually live at Mount Justice. Also, big apologies if you can hear my fan in the background, but my room is 20 degrees right now, and I really need to warm it up. Downtime, though, does serve to give us some really sweet moments between the two characters, and I just am a real sucker for seeing what these superheroes do in their day-to-day normal lives. At least that is until it's all forgotten. Now, this episode is highly important for McGann because it introduces what I would say is her true arch nemesis throughout at least the first 2 seasons of this show. That being Simon, another telepath in which McGann is going to have a little bit of issues trying to handle. But she herself is trying to not only regain her memories, but also help the team regain theirs because everybody has been mind wiped up to 6 months previous to when they have met. And by this point in the show, that quite literally takes Superboy back to being in his primal state of nothingness. Takes to McGann to well before she ended up on Earth, and so a lot of these characters no longer know each other in a good manner, essentially. So a lot of this episode ends up being spent with McGann trying to recover the memories of her teammates, while we also get to see different team dynamics be changed and shifted a little bit due to the lacking of memory. We're also treated to what I feel like is one of the most beautiful scenes in the show. I'm a real sucker for this kind of ethereal look they have going on with this scene. I really enjoy it. I thought it looked cool. This truly felt like one of the first episodes that was really focused on McGann, and I truly enjoyed that. I loved her battle with Simon in mental space, and it also is going to tie back to something later in this video, but her and Superboy getting to connect and mind meld was really cool.
Is that mindless creature supposed to save your mind?
No, I save his.
This show and Wolverine and the X-Men really did change how I looked at telepathy, and it made me think it was actually a cool power and not something that was totally lame. But this also serves as the first time that M'gann truly let loose with her powers and was not playing around when it came to straight up destroying a telepath that is supposed to be out of her league majorly just due to the fact that he has used his powers for longer. She is raw power when it comes to being a telepath. And now we've kind of hit the point in the season where M'gann gets to have a lot more episodes that aren't 100% tied to Connor, but she's got one more left that's very important. And that's the episode that they go undercover as the Terror Twins. In the episode, they're sent to Belle Reve in an attempt to figure out why a bunch of ICE villains are corroborating and hopefully try and prevent some sort of breakout attempt. Now, the collars they're wearing are like, think anti-mutant collars from X-Men, except they are specifically tailored to each meta-human and can only shut off certain powers. And since the Terror Twin that M'gann is portraying doesn't have any telepathy, she's able to freely use hers throughout the prison, which is going to help M'gann be able to communicate throughout the entirety of this episode. But for the most part, the episode isn't really important to her character. It's honestly way more important to Superboy's character, if we're being honest. M'gann goes out of her way, especially during the therapy scene of the episode, to try and get Superboy to work through the issues he has with Superman and the way in which he feels about the whole situation.
Tommy really wants to be like our father. Be able to fill Pa's shoes, you know? But Pa's distant at best. Refuses to give Tommy the time of day. It makes Tommy feel unworthy of...
Even if Superboy isn't very responsive, at least initially, she is always trying to go to bat for Connor, especially because she loves the guy. Like, I think it's pretty obvious by mid-season point that the two are very close and intertwined. This episode in particular finally stops teasing us with the whole will they, won't they thing, and finally just confirms their relationship. All, of course, off the back of M'gann almost dying because she couldn't help but play the hero during the Belle Reve escape, but thankfully Superboy kept his cool and was more than able to save M'gann, and we get their very first kiss. To which is probably my favorite side character's great confusion, because they're supposed to be twins. Man, I love Icicle Jr. But of course, with all new relationships come complications, and for M'gann, it ultimately stems from her own personal autonomy and Connor's want to protect her. This episode completely opens with the fact that, unfortunately, there's a mole on the team, or at least there is believed to be a mole on the team, and Aqualad ends up talking to Batman about this with Superboy overhearing. Specifically that it could possibly be him, Artemis, or M'gann, something that Superboy does not take kindly. And we see throughout this episode he is being very overprotective of M'gann, which, like, again, it's cool that Superboy wants to protect his girlfriend. I don't know if I made that clear enough in the Superboy video, but there are limits and there are boundaries. M'gann's her own person and is probably more capable than Connor will ever be. She is most likely more powerful than he will ever be. So it's very important that she establishes that line and is able to move forward with that. Is this really a big thing in the relationship and like grand scheme of her character? Not necessarily. But I really wanted to mention it because I thought this episode was doing a good job at inversing that trope that we often see in media where the man has to always protect the woman constantly. I thought it was good at doing that. On to some like more just team-based stuff, and that comes down to team trust. By this point in the show, we're almost like 20 episodes deep, and M'gann has developed such an amazing trust with her team that they almost do not speak out loud anymore. They almost all communicate telepathically because it is more secure. The League is not going to hear what they're saying, but that also makes everybody else kind of feel like an outsider. And it's also a testament to just how close M'gann has become with the rest of the Young Justice squad, because the team fully trusts her comparatively to earlier in the season when nobody wanted to mental link with her. I thought it was a really nice touch, and I thought it was really cool.
You guys having a psychic conversation? Because I can't decide if that's cool or really rude.
It also shows us once again just how much of a prodigy M'gann is when it comes to her telepathy, because she is easily able to rip through Moro's mind for information on Red Tornado. It's nearly instant. She's really good at that by this point. But having all of that raw, untapped, mostly untrained power ultimately becomes M'gann's biggest downfall. I'm not going to pretend like I don't know the whole thing behind this episode, so let's just be honest. The episode's fail-safe. The entire idea behind it is that this is a simulation where the Young Justice Squad can't win. The Justice League has been wiped out completely. There is nobody left on Earth to protect any of the people except for the Young Justice Squad. It's a training exercise to, I guess, see how they handle continuous and constant failure. So the team isn't really too upset when they see the Justice League die or they see Wolf die later in the episode, but it is when we see Artemis pass away that M'gann's mind, because this is all done through John Jones's telepathy, this is when M'gann's mind completely takes over and the simulation goes from being fake to being very, very real. M'gann basically took a basic training exercise and turned it into a true life or death experience, because even though her conscious mind understood that this is training, her unconscious mind did not. Her subconscious treated it as real. And because she is a far more powerful telepath than John Jones, she was able to easily overwhelm and overpower him. Even when John went in to try and stop the entire exercise, his mind was overwhelmed by M'gann's. This episode serves to show that she is extremely powerful, but also extremely untrained. And unfortunately, due to all of this, M'gann quite literally almost got her entire friend group killed. Since M'gann believed this to be real, she was killing her friends IRL just to make a point, I guess her mind was doing, because she thought it was over for them. Either way, first of all, this training exercise is really dumb. Like, I don't see the point in doing something like this at all, but all it ended up causing was an extreme amount of trauma for the entire group, and especially M'gann, because at the end of the day, this was her fault. And no matter how much blame she wants to put on John or Batman, or how much they try to take the blame, she will almost always feel responsible.
In terms of raw power, she has the strongest telepathic mind I have ever encountered. Stronger by far than mine.
And that's when I get to talk about one of my favorite episodes of the entire season, which is what comes after a situation like that. And it's very simple. You go to therapy to deal with something as extremely traumatic as that. And when M'gann goes to therapy, we start to really break into her character and why she is the way she is. During the time she's talking with Black Canary, she quite literally turns herself into being white, to look like Megan and not M'gann, because that's where she feels comfortable. She is not feeling comfortable being herself. And that's the core root of M'gann's growth throughout this first season, is trying to learn to be comfortable within yourself. And as much as Black Canary or anybody else tries to encourage it, M'gann will never be comfortable with herself until she chooses to be.
Which, by the way, I tried for a while after my very first canary cry nearly deafened my entire first grade class. So I get how you feel, but not being yourself is never the answer and won't make your feelings of guilt go away.
And that's where a majority of the conflict will stand for her character. Something I can definitely resonate within myself, which is being comfortable in your own skin and being comfortable within your sense of self, no matter how difficult it is. And M'gann just isn't there yet. Now, on a little bit of a lighter note, let's talk about the party episode in which M'gann decides to go to a Halloween party with Wally and Superboy at their school. I'm only including this because I wanted a bit of a breakup between the heavier episodes, and I really thought this episode was cool. Again, I love seeing superheroes do normal people stuff, and we also get one of my favorite lines from this first season.
Superman, done right.
He gives heavy Rand, and I love him for that. Outside of that, this episode has literally nothing, any sort of relevance to M'gann as a character, just them going to a party and hanging out. So I'm just gonna leave it at that, because now it's time for a way more serious episode. And I titled it Lies on my slide because that's what we're going to be exposed in this video. Lots and lots of lies. Let's start first and foremost with the fact that Megan was bold enough to go at her boyfriend with Black Canary and kiss him on camera. This is actually hilarious. And while it's really funny, it also services to show that Megan is still wildly out of touch with what is appropriate when dealing with IRL people, because this is definitely not. But one thing I found really interesting is when Dinah goes to confront Megan, what she ends up finding out is Megan is literally playing Megan Moore in her own room by herself. She is choosing to put on a skin color that is not her own, to actively not be herself. And I find that fairly interesting.
I'm not upset anymore, but please, Megan, from now on, just be yourself.
This is myself!
And if Megan didn't learn enough from that situation, she also has to learn that she's going to meet the greatest inspiration for the way she looks, the way she acts and carries herself. She has modeled her personality based off of Megan from the show Hello, Megan. Yeah, that show. For her, this is like amazing. It's like meeting your idol. But for Megan, or in this case, Marie, doing that thing was just a job.
Listen, Hello Megan was a job. The person you saw on TV isn't who I am.
And it's honestly implied that she didn't even want to do it. We know how child actresses and actors are treated terribly in the industry. I can only imagine what somebody like her would have gone through being so young. And throughout this episode, we're shown that her reality is she doesn't care for that character and doesn't want to be reminded of it. And it's even worse when her son gets hurt being attacked by the Queen Bee, who is currently in control of a fictional country state. And we are shown how powerful Megan is for like the 9,000th time. But we're also shown that Megan can save lives via blood transfusion, which I never thought of an application of using her powers like this, but very interesting. Regardless, the rest of the team is able to finally learn who Megan has essentially based herself off of completely. Who she acts like, talks like, and literally modeled herself to look like. And even gave Connor his name based off of the Connor from this show. She wanted to build that perfect life, that perfect sitcom life that was portrayed in like the 90s and early 2000s. Everything could be solved in 22 minutes. Everything was easy, everything was perfect, and there were no real issues. Megan chose to hide herself behind this because that's what was easier for her. I'm gonna take the wool off because everybody knows and Simon knows. Megan is a white Martian. Now, one of the biggest departures from the comic books and this show is that the white Martians in the comics went to bloody war with the green Martians and the entire planet got wiped out. But in John Jones's original character arc, in his original story, Mars was thriving and he simply went to Earth to be a superhero. So they took on a more classic interpretation and instead had the white Martians play allegory for subjugated races and or minorities in general throughout a majority of Mars. Growing up on Mars, Megan was quite literally viewed as nothing more than subhuman and as ugly, terrible, and less than the green Martian counterparts she was around. And she internalized that self-hatred from everyone and everything around her for the rest of her life, to the point that she chose to hide as nothing more than a green Martian because that was easier for her. She protected herself by pretending to be a green Martian in front of everybody. And Simon threatens to reveal that, threatens to reveal her greatest insecurity. And this is very important for future seasons. Megan chooses to literally break his mind completely so that he cannot tell anybody. She leaves him catatonic. And Megan is given the chance to actually expose herself, to show who she really is, and she decides not to, because that internalized self-hate will not let her show who she truly is ever, because she hates herself. Let's just be clear.
Maybe it was the way all Megan's problems could be solved in 22 minutes. All I know for sure is that Megan helped me smile through a lonely childhood. So, when I came to Earth and had to adopt a human form, I chose you.
She instead simply presents herself as being bald like John Jones is and moves on, instead of showing herself to be a white Martian. Even when Superboy reassures her that his love for her is not skin deep, she still refuses to show who she really is for fear of rejection. And it's all made worse when Queen Bee not only threatens to kill Garth, who she has happened to become very close with, but also threatens to expose her secret, to take away the family she has built with the Young Justice Squad and with Garth and Marie.
And if you don't cooperate, I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are.
I'm gonna pause for a moment just to talk. I very much resonated with this part of M'gann's character arc. The internalized self-hate. The idea that she can't be who she always wanted to be and she can't be herself, and that it was far, far easier to hide behind a caricature of herself than to be who she's supposed to be and to be the person that she wants to be. Instead, it's easier to regress and to pretend to be M'gann, to pretend to be something she's not. In this case, pretend to be a green Martian instead of embracing her white Martian heritage. Can you see the allegories here? For me, growing up black, I grew up in a place where there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me. I was the black kid. I was often scorned for it because I grew up in the Deep South. I understand that feeling when you look in the mirror and you absolutely hate what the reflection that looks back at you. I know what that feels like. And I didn't understand how to put it into words as a kid, but when I watched this on TV, I instantly knew. There's a reason I gravitate so heavily towards the X-Men. There's a reason I gravitate so heavily towards M'gann as a character, because she deals with the exact same thing I had to deal with growing up. That internalized self-hatred that will literally eat you from the inside out. And so I'm not surprised that given the opportunity, she didn't really reveal what she is to the people around her for fear of rejection and for fear of harm. There was a point in my life, specifically, where I just wanted to be white. Because if I was white, I wasn't going to get bullied. I wasn't going to have racial slurs yelled at me. I wasn't going to be accosted for the way I look, the way I walk, the way I talk, the way I carry myself as a black man in America. I think doing that with M'gann's character and to give her that depth on the back end was a really great idea and something that hits deeply personal to me. This is the reason why I'll probably never be able to separate this version of M'gann from any other version that she appears as, because this version is so near and dear to my heart, especially from a younger me. It's a reminder that it's okay to be who I am, and it will always be okay to be who I am, no matter how I look. And that goes for a lot of things. It doesn't just go for race. It goes for physical disabilities. It goes for being the way you are as a person. You should never feel like you can't be who you're supposed to be because of what other people tell you. And if you're going to take anything from this video, I hope you take that. And I think having a positive reinforcement, specifically from Black Canary, throughout this entire show, telling M'gann constantly it's okay to be yourself, it's okay to use your powers, it's okay to be who you are, was a great driving force. Because if you don't have an adult to tell you that, it can get really dark, especially at those formative ages. So I really do hope that some of you guys have a person like that. And if you don't, please seek it out. Okay, hopping off the soapbox and getting back to talking about M'gann. The episode starts out with the team going on a mission that doesn't exactly go as planned. They basically are barely able to win and almost lose, which unfortunately sparks the notion that the mole may or may not be back at this point in time, which is extremely aggravating to majority members of the team. But by this point, the team is actually full of moles. For example, Miss Martian is currently being a mole, kind of. I mean, the episode presents as though she is being a mole for Queen Bee in order to protect her family, both being her Young Justice family from her identity, but also protecting Garth and Marie in hopes that Queen Bee will leave them alone if she does what she says. And it's revealed to us throughout the episode that M'gann's not the only one being blackmailed. Superboy is also in on it, as well as Artemis. And while the episode presents as though they've all gone bad, oh no, the mole accusations were true, what really ends up happening is the team ultimately decides to come clean. Those three members decide to expose the reasons in which why they are going to go meet the Injustice Society and the reasons they were in cahoots with these people in the first place. And the answer is simple for McGann, at least. McGann is actually, for the first time, more than willing to reveal who she is as a person because she trusts the people around her. She's willing to be herself, even if it's only for a brief moment. McGann finally exposes herself to the people she feels closest to, the people she could probably call family. She decides to expose that she's a white Martian. She decides to expose partly the reason she chooses not to be, because of the hatred, the bigotry, and the classism that exists on Mars. It's the reason she pretends to be green and the reason it's easier for her to pretend she's in a sitcom and that she's playing a different character. There's a reason McGann does this, and she's finally explaining it to the group. There's also a reason all of her white Martian transformations are almost made to look horrific, because that's how she believes that side of her to be. But that's not what her team thinks, and it's by far not what her family thinks. Calder's the first one to say something, but it isn't skin deep with McGann. And Connor's always known. It was always about who McGann is on the inside. It was more than just skin deep.
I realized you would never accept me if you saw what I really am.
McGann, did we truly seem so shallow?
I couldn't take the chance. Being a white Martian among the green on Mars, I endured constant rejection. I couldn't face that from
me?
It's honestly a really sweet moment and something that I thought was very, very well done, but ultimately kind of feels a little bit undermined because McGann chooses to still be her green Martian self. She doesn't really embrace who she is, even if the team does. She's still not ready to embrace who she is. And I can resonate with that. Like I said, it took me years to finally be able to look in the mirror and be comfortable with who I am. And that just takes time. It doesn't just get fixed with one conversation. So while it feels great that it feels realistic in that sense, it also sucks because I would have loved to have seen her at least embrace some more portions of her culture and of her people going forward. And that does get addressed more in future seasons, which I'll talk about eventually when I get there. But this all leads to the season finale, which I have no notes on because there is nothing to talk about. Roy Harper's the real mole. The Justice League's been infected by Vandal Savage and Starotech, and they're under his control. They did some really shady shit over like the 48 hours, or was it 72 hours that he had control, or maybe it was 24, I can't remember. One of those three, lots of numbers. Either way, there's not much to say. McGann's character arc is completely wrapped up. There's nobody else left for me to talk about other than her and Connor get to ride off in the sunset together at the end of the season. I mean, overall, I really, really enjoy McGann as a character, and I really love this show. I think that's very obvious. I'm really glad I'm finally covering it on my channel. I don't know why I waited so long, because I love it so much. And this character does mean a lot to me, and I'll probably always be biased towards this version of the character for the reasons stated earlier. So I just want to take a moment and thank you all so much for watching. And for all intents and purposes, you guys are amazing. Yes, I know, I used my catchphrase. I'm really trying not to say that so often. Seriously, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to like the video, please leave a like. It'd help out the channel a lot. If you want to dislike the video and then comment down below telling me why. Constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you, as it keeps me on the lookout for audio issues, visual glitches, things of that nature, and I'm truly appreciative of it. As well, I do run a Patreon. Don't feel like you have to join, but it is $1 a month, and you'll get to see each and every one of these videos completely unedited and obviously early. That's what I offer with my Patreon, as well as access to the community Discord, in which you can interact with me and the rest of the community if you so fit. I'm trying to get back into the schedule of running weekly watch-alongs on my Discord, but college is kind of making that hard, so I don't want to promise that, but it is something I'm going to try to do. And as well, if you're in the $5 tier or above, you get shouted out at the end of each and every one of my videos, just like these lovely people here. So shout out Sup Zombie, shout out Roderick Hare, shout out Easy Frosty 13, shout out Gabriel LaFontaine, shout out Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Shout out Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.